power, he wants to expand his empire. That's every king's dream, right? So one of these kings in the 400s, his name was Xerxes. His Persian name, in Old Persian, which is his original native language, is Shayarsha. Well, that was hard for the Jews to pronounce, so they said Ahasuerus. We know him as Ahasuerus. And the Greeks said Xerxes, which is Xerxes. Okay? He was the husband of Queen Esther.
The young girl Esther lived during the Persian period, during the time of Xerxes I. Now the Bible and the biblical text, the king that eventually married this young Jewish girl was actually called Ahasuerus.
Now I don't know what Esther called him, whether she called him Shayarsha or Ahasuerus, but in any case, that was her husband. And this guy was power hungry. He was also really weird, had a very short temper, and he wanted to conquer Greece.
He invaded Greece, expanded the Persian Empire, the son of Darius, of course, and really established these major capital cities and palaces, finished them that his father Darius had started them, but he finished them, places like Susa and Persepolis and some of these fantastic cities of the Persian Empire.
But you can imagine, the Greeks never forgot what the Persians had done to them. So years later, see, this was in the 400s, over a century later, Alexander the Great rose up. His father was Philip of Macedon. Macedonia is to the north of Greece. And he then took over Greece. And the Greeks and the Macedonians had not forgotten what the Persians did, and they wanted revenge. And so they all got behind Alexander, and he went over and he defeated the main Persian army in 3 great battles, Issus, Granicus, and Arbela, in the 330s, captured Darius III, the last king.
The Greeks had been in tension with the Persians for quite some time. There had been several conflicts. The Persians had tried to invade Greece several times. And ultimately, under Alexander the Great, he was able to put a stop to the Persians once and for all in this great battle where he takes on Darius the Persian and wipes out the Persian army.
Alexander the Great, 331, on the field of Arbela, a marvelous battle in which, though he was outnumbered significantly, he defeats the Medo-Persian armies.
Alexander had assembled a group of infantry and cavalry numbering about 49,000 men. Darius outnumbered him by some estimates by 10 to 1, about 500,000 men, some estimates as high as 1 million. So you can see that Alexander was way outnumbered in that particular battle, but he had developed quite a few tactics, like the phalanx and other tactics from his father that he used very successfully in battle. And at one point in the battle, it got so intense that Darius just turned his horse around and fled, which was a signal for his entire army to do the same. And Alexander basically won battles several times that way, with Darius fleeing. If it had been a different king, if it had been a different time, and perhaps some biblical scholars quote the passage that says that God will strike fear into the hearts of kings. Perhaps this was a divine moment where God was deciding another empire was going to take over. Whatever the case may be, Alexander won when simply on human basis he shouldn't have won.
So you see this transition from Babylon to another kingdom, Medo-Persia, to a third kingdom of bronze, which shall bear rule over all the earth.
Now we come to the thighs, which are bronze. This is the Greek Empire.
That third kingdom is also mentioned exactly in Daniel chapter 8. It's the kingdom of Greece, or as it says in the Bible, Grecia. Okay? So, Babylon, then Medo-Persia, then Greece.
In other words, there is no room for interpretation here. It just labels it. So you see, there we have a historical anchor point. We know that Daniel is using these symbols, whether different kinds of metals, parts of a big image, or different animals, to refer to a succession of empires which come up and which particularly dominate the Middle East and the territory of God's people.
The Greek Empire is a very apt description for a world empire to succeed the Persian Empire. And again, that's an element Daniel seems to accurately reflect, the succession of empires.
Even though Alexander was so powerful, so intelligent, had been trained by the greatest Grecian philosopher, none other than Aristotle. Unfortunately, it turned out that Alexander, while he could conquer kingdoms and stand on top of the world, as it were, could not seem to conquer himself.
He had conquered the world, but he wasn't able to conquer his own demons, and he died in Babylon, leaving the empire no clear successor. And 4 of his generals took over: Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus, who divided up the empire in different parts, which fits perfectly the picture that we have in Daniel chapter 8.
So, Babylon, then Medo-Persia, then Greece. Now, watch what happens with the next kingdom. Very interesting, beginning in verse 40. And the 4th kingdom shall be strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. He devotes more time to this 4th kingdom than any of the other kingdoms. Okay? Now, when you look at this 4th kingdom, he says it will be extremely strong, extremely potent, extremely powerful, symbolized by iron. It will crush in pieces and break all of these other kingdoms. Okay? And that kingdom is none other than the great iron monarchy of Rome. Only one kingdom would fit.
The Roman Republic turns into the Roman Empire, and it becomes yet the greatest of all of these succession of empires yet. It's the strongest. It's depicted apparently in Daniel as the kingdom of iron, and certainly Rome, in terms of its raw strength, its wealth, its riches, its glory may not have been as great as Babylon or Persia or Greece, but in terms of raw strength, none of the previous kingdoms could surpass Rome, and so iron seems an apt description for the Roman Empire.
The Roman Empire was an empire known as a military empire, an empire known for its well-trained armies, for its tenacity, for its organization.
Known for their ferocity, known for their military strength and might, as well as a well-refined culture. Now, Jesus was alive during the time of the Roman Empire, right? Jesus was watched by Roman soldiers. Jesus stood before Pontius Pilate, a Roman governor. So you have the long legs of iron, representing Rome, were not conquered. Rome wasn't conquered from outside by a stronger, greater, more potent military power. Rome was divided. Well, I wonder what the prophecy says about that. Let's see what it says. Verse 41. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, look at these 5 words. The kingdom shall be divided. The kingdom shall be what? Divided. The kingdom will be divided. In other words, there will not be a conquering of this 4th iron kingdom, but the division of it. The kingdom will be divided.
And the final phase, which is not a kingdom, but it's following Rome, it's a breakup into iron and clay, which don't really mix together. So it's sort of a division of the Roman Empire.
In verse 41 it says, just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom, yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. So the iron continues, but it is now divided. And that's precisely what happened in this history of the Roman Empire as it moved from the domination of Rome to the division of Europe. We have a number of tribes, a number of barbaric tribes that come in and begin to cause havoc in the Roman Empire already early on, and then as time goes by, Rome as an empire loses its power.
After Rome would come a divided kingdom. It would be part clay and part iron. And they would not cleave together. They would not stick together. They would be in the form of a body part, but they would not be a single kingdom.
I mean, some of the great men in history, this has been their passion, to bring about a kind of cohesiveness, a kind of unity in Europe, and yet the Bible says it's not going to happen.
There were attempts. The story of Daniel seems to have this competing kingdom at the end of iron and clay. And it's interesting when you look at the history of Europe, you see parts of the disintegrating Holy Roman Empire remain strong. And there's different countries will at times emerge with great strength. The Franks will emerge, Charlemagne, through the Middle Ages. Different kingdoms seem to come to predominance, but none of them quite are able to hang on to power. And this has been sort of the history of Europe all the way from the disintegration of Rome through the Holy Roman Empire through the Middle Ages to the present. I suppose you could suggest Napoleon was one of the more recent examples of trying to unite Europe into one kingdom like had happened in Roman times or Greek times or Persian or Babylonian times. But he doesn't succeed. It fragments. The rest of the iron and clay join up against him and the French Empire falls.
The prophecy says, and history confirms, that Rome was not conquered from outside, but divided. It was divided. And then it says something amazing. It says that they would mingle themselves with the seed of men. Now that's kind of an awkward phrase, kind of an unusual phrase, but what it means is very simple. It means that they would try to bring unity to the nations of divided Rome by a kind of artificial nuptial bond. That is to say that they would try to bring about unity through marriage. And this is exactly what the history of Europe reveals.
And one of the main ways that they tried to get unified was through intermarriage of their families, as Daniel says. Now we're talking about long after the time of Daniel. This is incredible. In fact, one of the main people who was doing this kind of intermarriage was Maria Theresa in the 1700s, the time of Mozart. She ruled over the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And she had a lot of children, especially daughters. She had a lot of daughters. And she married them to all kinds of other rulers. They didn't have a choice, most of them. One did. Her favorite daughter had a choice. So she gained power by having it all in the family, you see. And that's the way they tried to control Europe.
The Duke of this country would marry the Duchess of that country. The King of this country would marry the Queen of that country. The Prince of this country would marry the Princess of this country, all the while trying to bring about an artificial unity, thinking that family ties and family bonds would bind the nations of divided Rome together in such a way that they would once again be unified. Now, as if that's not amazing enough, the text says that it wouldn't work, that it wouldn't cleave or adhere together.
Even though they attempted to have unity through intermarriage, it did not work because the prophecy is sure. These countries will not cleave together, no matter what humans might try.
The critic says, too accurate, too precise, must have been written after the division of Rome sometime. Okay? Everybody agrees Daniel is accurate. So the question is, was it written before, with the traditional authorship, 500 to 600 years before the time of Jesus, or was it written sometime after the division of Rome, 500 to 600 years after the time of Jesus? That's the question.
From the standpoint of an archaeologist, I would say that we have a lot of new evidence in the last several years that supports the historicity and the accuracy of the book of Daniel.